Hello children, hope you are fine. This is Radha, your English teacher. Yes, in our last class we have already studied part 1 of Lois Pasture, what he does and what he did and what he was doing. All this we studied. So let us continue more about him. So this is part 2, Lois Pasture, Conqueror of Disease. This is one of many hundreds of experiences. This is only one of many hundreds of experiments which Pasteur made to show how full the air is of dust particles and how germs may be carried by this dust. In our last paragraph, we stopped that he was talking about the dust. So let us continue in the same. Now here he was talking about the dust, how the dust particles, that is how the germs are formed in the dust. Now he started to discover about this. One very useful experiment was made to show the difference between pure and stale air. Now here he has taken the pure and the stale air, how the dust will form in this air. He wanted to discover about the concept. Pasteur again filled some bottles with soup. He took some into a little hotel bedroom where the air hardly ever changed, broke their necks off so that the air could enter freely. So now he started a new experiment. He went into the hotel bedroom where there is a little open air, and he took a bottle of soup and he went into the room and he opened the lid of the bottle so that the air can move freely. And after a few minutes, sealed them up again. So now what did he do? He closed the lid. That is, he sealed the lid. He then took some bottles into a field nearby and did the same with them. And now the room experiment is over. Now he wanted to go out and see what happens. Finally, he opened some of the tops of the high mountain and again sealed them. What did he do? He took them out. He took them to the mountain and he took them outside. Now, the first experiment, he was in the room, and in the room he put the bottle, he put the lid. After that, he removed the lid. And so now this is the inside environment air. So now he is going outside to the mountain, and he opens the lid of some bottles and he sees what happens. When they were examined, the bottles opened in the hotel bedroom were full of soup which had gone completely moldy. Moldy means bad. Now, when he was inside and he did the experiment in the hotel bedroom, here the soup has become moldy. The bottles opened in the field were moldy but not quite so bad. So here he says, in the room when I opened the soup, it was bad. But at the same time, the outside experiment what I did, it was also bad, but it was not so bad. It was not so bad. Those opened on the mountain had no germs in them at all. So now here, when he did the experiment outside, it was bad, it was not so bad, and there were no germs. He says this was the next experiment what he conducted. Nowadays, we pay a great deal of attention to pure air, isn't it? These days, we all need pure air. So what we do, we open the windows, we open the door, we go outside, we have a nature walk and all that, right? To get a pure air. To freedom from dust, that is, we want to get rid of the dust. To garden cities, Pasture was one of the first to show how necessary all these are if we are to fight against germs and diseases. So we all believe that if we want to get rid of all these germs and diseases, we have to have pure air. We have to have nature's pure air. We feel that, yeah. So here Pasteur also says that he has made so much necessary for us to fight against the germs. Another very useful discovery of Pasteur's while he was working in Paris was the process which we now call after him pasteurization. Some French wine growers were troubled by a germs which had turned in their wine sour. So now here what happened? Now as Pasteur was into the Paris, he was assigned. He was working as a chemist there, and now when he was in Paris, there were those scientists had discovered the wines after few days it was turning into a sour, means it was going little bad. So now he started getting into this experiment now. Okay. Pasteur showed that by heating the wine, that is, now Pasteur is experimenting, he says that heating up the wine or milk or whatever it might be at the temperature of 50 to 60 degrees centigrade, the germs were made harmless. He says, whatever it is, either the wine or the milk of anything, when you heat it up with the degree of 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, the harm will be less, means it will not go bad. Pasteurized milk is milk which has been treated in this way and then sealed to prevent more germs from entering. Now what do children, we all have pasteurized milk, pasteurized food, Pasture means which is packed. So now here he says this is what we do. We boil them it from 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. So that is, so that the harmless will be less, and we immediately seal it so that the germs will not enter into that substance. Louis Pasteur was what we call an all-round scientist. Yes, children, as we have been studying about him, so many experiments he is doing. So of course we all call him as all-round scientist. It means he is involved in all-round experiments. All the research which he did in his laboratories was meant to help his fellow human beings. That is, although he was not involved in other scientific experiments, he himself used to go and involve and help the fellow members, means help his colleagues. It would be impossible to imagine Pasteur experimenting with explosive or poison gas. Pasteur founded the branch of science. Of course, no children, you all know, no, Pasteur, he founded the branch of science which we call it as bacteriology. Yeah, which we call it as bacteriology. He found the branch of science which is called as bacteriology, or the study of bacteria. So this bacteriology is nothing but the study of bacteria. It is the study of germs. And he showed what a wide range it had by studying the bacteria in all sorts of different activities. He says that it was a wide, means it was a huge experiences learning about the bacteria. How did the bacteria come? How do they attack? What are the causes? As a result, everything he had studied about bacteria. For 3 years, he spent all his time and energy in tracking down the cause of a disease which had reigned a silkworm industry. As I had told you in the beginning, why Pasteur was involved very much in experimenting, because he wanted to help the poor fellows who were working in the manufacturing industries company, where they were all infected by the bacteria. So coming up to the point here, he says he was so much involved in one of the experiments that he has spent 3 years to experiment what, how, and why. Yeah, he took 3 years to experiment and get successful in one silkworm industry. He began to believe that most, if not all, infectious diseases were due to certain bacteria which, if they get into the blood, multiplied there and cause disease. Now he says here, he got into an experiment of the silkworm industry. Now he says the bacteria gets into our blood. Yeah, the bacteria, that is the germs, gets into our blood, and that will multiply, means it will become more. The bacteria will become more. This he has discovered in the silkworm industry. Many other men were working and experimenting against those bacteria which were the enemies of man and which are invisible but present everywhere and always ready to attack. Children, bacteria is something which is invisible. We cannot see. Even in this place, there might be bacteria running around, but we are not able to see. And it gets into our body and it may cause some diseases, he says. So he means that bacteria is everywhere. That is, the germs are everywhere, which we cannot see. Dr. Jenner in England had already discovered vaccination for smallpox, but inoculation against other diseases had not yet started. Now here there was a vaccination found. There was a vaccination found in England by Dr. Jenner, but it was not. Discovered. Sorry. Dr. Jenner in England had already discovered vaccination for smallpox, but inoculation against other diseases had not yet started. Now here in England, Dr. Jenner, he had found a vaccination for the smallpox. Okay, vaccination for the smallpox. Pasteur was trying to discover a cure for a terrible disease called anthrax, which men sometimes get from infected shaving brushes and which was attacking cows and sheep in France and killing them off very quickly. So now here he gets into another experiment. The next one, it was a very terrible disease which is called anthrax, which was spread through the men shaving brushes which was infecting them. Okay, and this was affecting the cows and the sheep, and they used to die very soon because of the infectious disease. They used to die soon. He found out first of all, the cow could not have anthrax twice. He says that this disease, anthrax, cannot come in a cow for more than one time. Yes, this should come only once. And why the cows are getting twice? Let me start to discover. He starts. Then he began to wonder whether it would not be possible to make a cow and even a man just a little ill with anthrax, so that they might not get it again. So now he is worried of finding a vaccine or finding a solution for this problem, anthrax disease. He says, why people and cows and sheep are getting this disease? Perhaps this could be done by giving the cows or sheep very weak old germs to make them safe or immune for the future. Now he is thinking of giving them the immunes for these cows and sheep so that they will not be attacked with this anthrax diseases. One can imagine how dangerous this idea of giving people germs must have seemed in those days. Imagine children in those days before whatever the diseases they used to get, they never used to have any vaccination. They never used to have any protected injection. They just used to die. So that is what he says. Imagine if the vaccine wouldn't have been found, what would be the scenario? Many scientists were angry about it, but they agreed to allow Pasteur to prove it by a public experiment. Now here the Pasteur wanted to discover with the public, and he wanted to know what is the reason of getting this anthrax. Initially, as all the scientists, they were opposing him. Why do you want to conduct this with the public and all that? But finally, they gave him a permission to conduct an experiment in the public. For what disease? Anthrax. So Pasteur collected some sheep, goats and cows and divided them into two lots. So now what happened? Pasteur collected all the animals, sheep, goats and cows, and he divided them into two lots. To one lot, he gave injections of his weak anthrax. Now he gave a weak injection of anthrax germs. The other lot was left alone. So now he divided these animals into two slots, and for one slot of animal, he had given the anthrax injection, that is germs injection. For the others, he did not give. The other lot was left alone. Then on a certain day, all the animals were injected with the most deadly anthrax germs that could be produced. Now slowly he started giving an injection, the anthrax germs, so that they may get a little immune. On the third day after the experiment, the crowd of people gathered around the sheds to see what had happened to the animals. Now all the people gathered. What is happening to all the animals? What is happening here? So there was a crowd at the animals husbandry. Pasteur, even though he was so sure of himself, must have felt nervous. All of 24 animals that had first been protected by weak germs were perfectly well. Now his experiment is going to be a success now. As he had given an anthrax germs injection, these animals were a little well. Okay, the one slot of animals which were injected, they were a little well. The deadly injection had done them no harm at all. The injection which he gave to these animals did not harm. Of the other 24 animals, 22 were dead. Now here the injection which he has not given to the other animals, they were dead. And the other 2 were dying. They were about to die. 22 were already gone, and other 2 were about to die. When the news spread that Pasteur had discovered a cure for anthrax, hundreds of people wrote to him for supplies of vaccine or weak germs. and he had to turn his laboratory into a kind of small germ factory. Since Pasteur was a very successful in the experiment which he had done recently, that is, he found the vaccine for the animals for the disease called anthrax. Now uh, he started getting many of the turns from the laboratories asking for the vaccine. And now he says that now his laboratory into a kind of a small germ factory. That is, his laboratory should be turned into a small germ factory. Pasteur received many honors from the French government, and in 1881 he came to a big medical congress in London. When he walked down the hall, there was a storm of applause. He looked around, thinking that the chairs must be for some royal person, but Pasteur could hardly believe that the applause was meant for him. Such a beautiful paragraph this is. Now here Pasteur was received a honor in the French government, and as he was walking into the Congress in London, and everyone started applauding him. That is, everyone started to clap. He did not feel that clap is for me. He did not believe that this clap is for me. That clap is somebody who is coming behind me, a big people, he thought. He could not believe the applaud is for him. Of his last experiment was in connection with a terrible disease, and now it was his last experiment that was a terrible disease which attacks a person who is bitten by a dog. With rabies, a mad dog, as we call it. In those days, children, if a dog bites, we would not have got any vaccine in those days. But here it was the terrible disease which was bitten by a mad dog. Now he has to find a vaccine on this. When a dog bites, he has to start discovering a vaccine for a human. Pasteur had grown very sure about the power of inculation. He was very sure that he will find a vaccine even for the dog bite, that is the rabies. And he decided to try out the same idea in case of rabies. At that time, nearly everyone died who was bitten in the diseased dog. Means the dog, a mad dog which was bitten, the person used to die. In 1885, Pasteur made his first experiment on a young Alsatian boy who came to him in Paris covered with bites from a mad dog. So now he experimented a new discovery. That is, he found a solution. There was a boy who came to him. He was bitten by a dog. He tried a small experiment. The boy's mother told Pasteur, if you can cure animals, you can cure my son. He says, you are able to cure and you are able to find the vaccine for the animals. But why can't you help my son for the vaccine? So Pasteur inoculated him with some weak rabies germs and the boy recovered. So now what happened? He tried to give a small weak rabies germs, but the boy was able to recover, which was bitten by the mad dog. Although Dr. Jenner had already discovered how to vaccinate against the smallpox, he did not really understand about bacteria. Pasteur, after giving his life to his study, was able to prove the value of inculation and to find out ways of varying it for different diseases. So now here Pasteur was so brilliant and so many experiments he has conducted, and all of his experiments were very successful. So here Dr. Jenner had already discovered how to vaccinate about the smallpox. He did not really understand about the bacteria. Pasteur, after giving his life to his study, was able to prove the value of vaccine. So once he started to discover the vaccine, he understood the value, how much important this injection is, and find out ways of varying it for different diseases. During the First World War in 1914 and 18, the troops going abroad were inoculated against such diseases as thyroid and atric fever, and the very low death rate from these illnesses among the troops, even in unhealthy places, was a great tribute to Pasteur's work. Now, what happened during the World War of 1914 to 1918? There were people who were going to abroad for the vaccine against such diseases, for the thyroid and atric fever, and they were, because of the vaccine given, there was a very low death rate because the vaccine was found, and it was a great tribute to Pasteur's work. Pasteur's memory is still honored in the Institute Pasture in Paris. And it means his name is still remembered in the Pasture or in Paris. When bacteriology is studied by men of all nations, at the opening of the Institute in 1888, Pasteur said, two opposing laws seem to be now in contest. Now he says that there are two opposing laws which are in contest. It means a law of blood and death. We have two oppositions of law. Okay, a law of blood and death, a law of peace, work and health. I repeat, he says there are two opposing laws, that is a law of blood and death, a law of peace, work and health. These are opposing two laws. I don't know who is going to win. God only knows who is going to win, he says here. Those only aim into delivery man from the disaster which surrounded him. The one seeks violent conquest, the other the relief of mankind. So here he says this is violent and this is the mankind, he says. God only knows, but of this we may be sure that science is obeying the law of humanity, will always labor to enlarge the frontiers of life. So he says, I am not sure who is going to win, but God knows. But I shall do my ability. I shall be in success, finding out the solution for the problems, for the poor. Someone who knew Pasture well in his old age describes him thus. Now here what happens? Someone describing Pasture who knows him, how he is, what he is, and how he was looking. Okay, wary with deep line on his face. What happened? He has the deep lines on his face, the skin and beard both white, his hair still thick and nearly always covered with a black cap. Now here, someone who knows Lois Pasteur, he is describing his physical appearance, that he is wearing a cap and he also had a beard with white, and he had the lines on his face. All these he is describing. A beard, forehead wrinkled, marked with the lines of genius, the mouth slightly drawn by paralysis, but full of kindness. Children, this answer they may ask you for the exam. Describe Lois Pasteur. So please note these points. I'll repeat. Okay, Pasteur well in his old age describes him thus: weary, with deep lines on his face, the skin and beard both white, his hair still thick and nearly always covered with black cap, the broad forehead wrinkled, marked with the lines of genius, the mouth slightly drowned by paralysis, but full of kindness, and all above the living thought which still flushes from the eyes beneath the deep shadow of the eyebrows, the description of Lois Pasture. On Pasture's 17th birthday, his jubilee was celebrated almost like a national festival. So his 70th birthday was celebrated like a national festival. Like Lord Leicester, he was honored in his old age by the scientists of all nations. He was honored means he was appreciated as all the scientists of all the nations were appreciated. Now here even the Lois Pasture was appreciated. At a crowded meeting in a great hall of the University of Paris, the old man was too overcome to speak, and his speech was read to the distinguished audience by his son. Now here what they say, on 17th birthday of Lois Pasture, they celebrated his birthday as a national festival, and they had honored him in a very big place, that is the Great Hall of University of Paris. The old man was too overcome to speak, and his speech was read to the distinguished audience by his son. His son gave a speech. The future, he said, will belong to those who shall have done the most for suffering humanity. I repeat, the future, he said, will belong to those who shall have done the most for suffering humanity. To the young students, he addresses, my dear children, to you all. To the young students, he addresses a special word. First, ask yourselves. It means you are reading this paragraph, so please understand he is addressing to the young students. It may be for you also. What have you done for my education? What have I done for my education? I have written a beautiful 2 questions which is asked by him to us. What have I done for my education? What did you do? What have I done for my country? A beautiful 2 questions were addressed. See, yeah, so beautifully he says, first ask yourselves, what have I done for my education? Then as you advance in life, what have I done for my country? So now this is an education question, is of course for you youngsters, but as the life gets on and on, you'll grow bigger. At that time you question yourself, what have you done for the country? So that someday that supreme happiness may come to you. So he says, I'm sure if you get the answer for this about the education and about the country, you will definitely get the answer and you will definitely be happy, he says. The consciousness of having contributed in some measures to the process and welfare of humanity. Pasteur himself certainly knew that happiness. He died in 1895 when he was 75, and no name in science is more honored or will longer be remembered. Of course, children, because of all his hard work, dedication, time, he spent so much of time to discover so many experiments to find the solution, to find the vaccination. Here they say nobody would have worked so hard like Lois Pasture. And of course, we will be remembering him throughout. This is all about the Lois Pasture, the conqueror of the disease. Okay, and let's have a recapitulation. Okay, Pasture founded the branch of science called bacteria. Yeah, the vocabulary words, anthrax and rabies. Inoculation, it is a vaccination, and these are the two questions he asked. What have I done for my education? And what have I done for my country? Such a beautiful question. Answer yourself, ask yourself. Okay, children, I hope you understood the lesson, part 1 and part 2. Thank you, children.